Well, the day is here. The day is here, and I know most of us were not really looking forward to this day, but we all knew it was coming after what transpired last week. So, not only did the Seahawks have a bad season, not only did the Seahawks finish last in the division, not only did every non Seahawk team in the division, the NFC West, make the playoffs, but now we got two NFC West teams in the conference title game playing for the right to go to the Super Bowl. Not what we envisioned when this season started, but now that we're here, we have to acknowledge the fact that that is the case. Hopefully, we learn something from it. If you take a look at the way these two teams did things that allowed them to get to this point, maybe the Seahawks team can learn something from that, and hopefully the annoyance of having to watch this NFC title game this year drives us to try a little bit harder next year. Try a little bit harder to assemble better players when the free agency period hits, better players in the draft, and maybe it just drives this front office to commit a little harder because clearly full commitment is what it's going to take to even have a chance in this division. This is obviously a strong vote for the whole iron sharpens iron philosophy, where these teams were able to get here because they played difficult competition within their division all year. Even the Seahawks, well, I would say after, if you factor in the 4-2 record at the end of the season, after, I mean, let's face it, the season was already kind of over. They weren't a complete pushover. They gave you competition. Even when they were terrible, they were giving teams competition. So if you are a believer in iron sharpens iron and that playing in a difficult division prepares you for the playoffs and allows you to overcome obstacles in the postseason that a team like the Packers couldn't compete in a way that a team like the Packers couldn't compete with because they play in a terrible division, then this NFC title game is a vote for that. So, all that to the side now. Forgetting all that, I have a simple question and I want to see what people think in the comments. Who are you rooting for in this game, or who are you rooting against? Some of you guys, a lot of you guys are probably thinking about it more like that. You're rooting for somebody to lose. You're not really rooting for somebody to win. But either way, who do you want to win this game, even if it's by virtue of the fact that that you're really rooting for the other team to lose? The Los Angeles Rams or the San Francisco 49ers? And once you answer that question, I guess the next interesting question would be why? What has driven you to that conclusion? For me, I am pulling for the 49ers. I think that the reasons for this are mostly pretty obvious. The 49ers, the way they have put together that team, it just feels a little more real. It feels a little more honest and authentic. They have a they are mostly built around the fact that they have a great coach and they have done a great job drafting. They've drafted guys like Deebo Samuel. They've drafted guys like Fred Warner and Bosa, and the pieces that they brought in from other teams. Like every team does that. Understand that, but they have by and large put together this team. I mean, their quarterback is not really the reason why they're winning games, but even though they got him from another team, he really didn't do that much with his prior team. He was largely developed and groomed in San Francisco. So even in the case of somebody like a Jimmy Garoppolo who didn't start with the Niners, he's basically done most of the stuff that he's done as an NFL quarterback as a Niner. So there's something very genuine about the way the 49ers have put this team together. And perception is a big part of it, right? I don't know if you can say this is 100% reality, but this Rams team, it doesn't feel that way. They import a guy like a Matthew Stafford. They import guys like Odell Beckham. They import guys like Von Miller. It feels more like that super team. Whereas the 49ers, they feel more like a normal team. And part of you, I think, when you're trying to figure out who to root for, you're going to root for the team that feels a little more authentic. It's like if the Brooklyn Nets and Milwaukee Bucks play each other in the Eastern Conference Finals this year. I think a lot of impartial people will find themselves rooting for the Bucks because the Bucks are they just feel more like a normal team, whereas the Brooklyn Nets feel like a team that was thrown together by a bunch of people who were just desperate to try to win that ring. Now, that obviously is overly simplistic. The Rams did draft Aaron Donald. They did draft a guy like a Robert Woods. They did find and develop a guy like a Cooper Kupp. There are pieces on that team that are authentically part of that Rams organization and have been for a while. But I think that's one of the reasons. I will say this. The Rams pushed all their chips in to win this year. We all know that. You can look at their cap space. It speaks for itself. So if they lose this game and don't make it to the Super Bowl, it's funny. But by that same token, it's also a little scary if the Niners make it in a year where they didn't go all in at all, really. So there is a little bit of a double-edged sword there. If this 49ers team gets to the Super Bowl in a year where they barely played their number 3 overall QB, the Trey Lance, where they honestly, I think for the most part, were thinking we don't know what's going to happen this year. 2023, or well, 2022 is going to be the year. So that's terrifying, but it's already terrifying as is that they made it this far. And I understand that they barely made the playoffs and then had to win some very competitive games in the first 2 rounds of the playoffs. But regardless, they've done more than we have in 7 years. They have made it further than this team has with 7 years with Russell Wilson. And they're doing this stuff with Jimmy Garoppolo. So that is scary. But I think I would still rather have the Rams going all in and losing all their chips. So that part of it is a consideration as well. But for me, and this is where your personal experience as a fan comes in, I think that the main reason why I'm pulling for the Niners today, a game starts in like 6.5 hours. When I started watching the Seahawks, when I started following the Seahawks, neither of these teams were our rivals. Our rivals were the Broncos, the Raiders, the Chiefs, and the Chargers. We barely played the Niners and Rams. But when I first started really getting into football, like really started being invested into it, when I started understanding what I was seeing on a little bit of a higher level than just watching a bunch of people wearing uniforms running around, that was about the time that the Seahawks had moved over to the NFC West, and you had the greatest show on turf in LA. I'm sorry, not LA, St. Louis. See, I've actually started to slowly teach myself how to refer to them as the Los Angeles Rams. And by the way, I'll get to this later, but that talent that I've developed may end up being wasted in like a decade. But anyway, the Rams, they had the greatest show on turf with Kurt Warner. I didn't so much hate that team, the Torrey Holt, Isaac Bruce, Marshall Faulk crew. I didn't really hate that team, but when I really started to get deeper into the Seahawks fandom stuff, Mark Bulger was there, Steven Jackson was there, and that was the team that gave us a lot of trouble. They had that one year, 2004. I remember they beat us 3 times. They beat us at home in the playoffs. I was at that game, the game where Bobby Ingram dropped the game-tying touchdown pass in the end zone with a few seconds left on 4th down, and that was a formative experience for me as a fan. I was already a hardcore fan, but being in the stadium for that game affects you. So, to me, when I was really forming myself as a Seahawks fan, the earliest memories that I have as a Seahawks fan come from that Mark Bulger era. I have some memories of like 96, going to a few games when we had Rick Meyer and Dennis Erickson. I vaguely remember the early Mike Holmgren era. I remember playing the Dolphins with John Kitna at quarterback in the playoffs, almost winning that game, but finding a way to lose it at the end. But I think the point that my Seahawks fandom really started to solidify was during that era in 2003, 2004, when the Rams were the team that we had to get past if we wanted to be great. And at that time, the Niners were kind of a joke. They had lost T.O. They had a revolving door at quarterback after Jeff Garcia with guys like Tim Rattay and Cody Pickett. They might have had Sonny Six Killer at one point. They bring in Mike Nolan, and he ends up really not working out at all. The Niners were not really a big threat when I was really starting to put my roots down as a Seahawks fan who was going to be more than just somebody who watched the game for 3 hours every week and then didn't think about the team until it was time for them to play again. So, as I sit here, 32 years old, that's the stuff that really kind of molded me as a fan. I remember, like I said, '04, losing to them 3 times. We blew a 17-point lead in one of those games, and then you come back the next year, and the moment you knew the 2005 Seahawks were going to be pretty good was when they went into St. Louis, beat the Rams. I actually remember we were punting the ball to them with a couple minutes left, up by 6, and I think our long snapper forced a fumble on their punt returner, Sean McDonald, to seal the game. And then you knew this team was great when later that year they played the Rams at home and managed to gut out a difficult win there. And we had swept the Rams. Now, at that point, the Rams basically... We didn't lose to the Rams again until like 2010. The Rams became a bottom feeder. But it was still those early to mid '00s Rams teams that had mostly Mark Bulger. I know they had Kurt Warner before that, but for me, the guys who I really grew to dislike, the guys who I really grew to want to beat were the Mark Bulger, Mike Martz, Torrey Holt, Isaac Bruce, to a certain extent, Steven Jackson crew. Did not like those guys. And meanwhile, 49ers, some years, were providing us 2 free wins. So, I think that there are a lot of people in this fan base, a lot of people who watch my videos, who hate the Niners more than the Rams. And I think the reason why might be kind of the same idea, just flipped. Because if you take a look at the Rams after that Mark Bulger, Steven Jackson, Torrey Holt run, they were terrible for quite some time. Jeff Fisher, they could be a pain in our ass, but they were not a pain in the NFL's ass at all. They were terrible. They might have been the worst team in the league over like a 7-year span. Like I said, we beat them. It felt like 10 times in a row at one point. I don't know if it was, but it felt like it. So, meanwhile, the 49ers, they bobbed around for a little bit as well, but I think a lot of Seahawks fans who watch my videos, they started really getting into the Seahawks during the Jim Harbaugh, Alex Smith, well, not Alex Smith so much, Colin Kaepernick, Aldon Smith, that era of 49ers football. So I feel like the reason why there's a little bit of a split here, why we are going to see some Seahawks fans hoping that the Rams take care of business, is because they hate the Niners. And the 49ers, especially now that the Rams are in LA, the 49ers have more fans, and those fans are a little more demonstrative, I think. So those factors, the fact that you have a 49ers team that when a lot of these Seahawks fans were really starting to get into the game, were making the NFC title game 3 years in a row, I think that they really formed some seeds of hate for that organization then. We beat them to go to the Super Bowl. So in 2013, they were the team that we had to get past when we first got Wilson and Wagner and some of this crew. So I think that there are a lot of Seahawks fans who hate the 49ers more than the Rams, and they might be very well rooting for the Rams to win this game. But I think it's just when you really started to put your roots down as a Seahawks fan. So that's my story. Let me know yours. Let me know why you're rooting for whoever to win this game. And the final point I want to make before I end this video is there is something so annoying about this Rams team being in LA. I watch these Rams home games, and Michael Buffer comes out to do his Let's Get Ready to Rumble before games, and there's just something about it that doesn't sit right with me. You see all the celebrities in the stands. You see the desperate things they have to do just to try to get actual Rams fans in the stadium for their home games, which, by the way, didn't work. And it kind of reminds me, this team should probably not be in LA. This team should probably be back in St. Louis, and it's probably just not going to work out for them. So That's another factor as well, but let me know. Let me know what you think down below. I'm going to get out of here. Go Hawks. See you guys after the game.